Hi everyone, my name is Vince Gauman, and as you can see I have a beautiful backdrop here. It's the Pacific Ocean, and I'm standing here in Lighthouse Park in West Vancouver on the west coast of Canada, and I'm hoping it doesn't rain, that I can get through this without it starting to rain. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'm here to talk about 3 stages of healing and awakening. And I'm always a little bit cautious when using a number to describe something that's quite complex. For instance, I'm wary when writing or speaking about 3 steps or 4 levels or 5 stages, because nothing in the natural world and nothing in the healing and awakening journey is linear. And so these stages interweave, and you may go forward a few steps and go back a few steps. So it is, I would like you just to hold that in your mind and your heart as I talk about them. So the first step or first stage of healing and awakening is to heal your trauma and clear your programming. Now, I want to start with a metaphor. I want you to imagine that trauma is like soil, and that soil is like an energetic imprint. And those energetic imprints we hold in our musculature, in our bones, and in our cells, certainly in our DNA. And we carry that at the soul level as well. And so a lot of those karmic imprints, as it's often referred to, transfer from one life to another. So it's an energetic imprint, the way I see trauma. And I'd like you to imagine that out of the trauma grows a weed. And the weed is a belief. And let's say the belief is, I am wrong, I am bad, it's my fault, I'm unworthy, I'm not good enough. Out of the soil of trauma grows weeds. The more we latch onto those weeds and the more we identify with them, or just really believe them as true, they become the narrative of our life. They become the story of trauma or the story of suffering. And so we have a trajectory built based on our attachment to that belief, which then becomes a full-out story. So healing involves clearing enough of the energetic imprints so we can more easily pull out those weeds. Now I want to give you an example, a personal example. I did many ayahuasca shamanic healing ceremonies, and in one of them, in this particular ceremony, I'd already done quite enough healing by this point. So I just need to say that up front. So suddenly this little being showed up in front of me in a glass bubble spaceship. And he asked me, and I know this might sound out there for some of you, but in the realm of ayahuasca, this is quite normal. And if any of you have had mystical experiences, this is quite normal, or some variation of that is quite normal. But anyways, this being showed up in this little glass spaceship, and he said, "Jump in." And I said, "Okay." So I jumped in, and he flew me around and around like an orbit, this huge, very thin, like hourglass-shaped structure. And he said, "You see that? That's your belief, I am wrong." And then he said, "Because you've done enough healing work by now, you can now choose to release it. You can choose to release it." And so there'd been enough softening, releasing, clearing of the soil to create enough space for that weed to be easily pulled out. See, while the soil is dense and heavy and thick, it's much harder to pull out the weed. What often people do, also known as spiritual bypassing, is they cut the weed. But to heal, to really transform, we have to go into the root and pull it out. So the moment he said, "You now have the choice, you can pull that out." Well, he didn't say pull it out. He said, "You can choose otherwise. You don't have to believe that anymore." I felt this huge fear in me, massive amount of fear. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had an allegiance to that belief. I had a strong allegiance or loyalty to it. And that was a huge wake up for me. I realized how strong the attachment is to these trauma stories, how identified we are with these old, toxic, unhealthy beliefs. So that now speaks to the second stage, which is to end the identification with suffering. And that's a massive one, to end the identification with suffering. So long as I was identifying with that belief that had its roots in the soil, I was attached to suffering. I was identified with suffering at a very unconscious level. So I made the courageous decision in that moment that I am going to choose otherwise. I was no longer going to identify with I am wrong. So it wasn't about simply saying I am right. It was actually about saying I am not wrong. And so I took a deep breath, and the fear was building in me. The fear was building in me because it was like, don't do it. You need me. You need me. That's what if the belief was going to say one thing, it would say, you need me. It was protecting me from the unknown. Right? Because keep in mind, that's what I've known, is I am wrong on an unconscious level. It's quite comfortable. And I said, I am not wrong. And then I felt huge amount of fear come through my system. And I was laying on my back and I had my knees up and I just bounced my sacrum, for 15 minutes and just cleared and cleared and cleared all this fear out of my system. It was an incredible experience. I felt so much lighter afterwards. And so there is a deep attachment and identification with suffering that humanity has that they're not aware of. And to clear that possibility out, we have to clear the trauma out. We have to clear the trauma out. It makes it easier to simply walk away from that identity, which speaks to the third stage, which is what I call turning to the light. Turning to the light. To turn to the light, you have to walk away from something. You have to walk away from the story of suffering that you've held in yourself. And this includes the programming, which I spoke to earlier on. You have to clear that out as well. The programming that comes from the collective consciousness, the programming that comes from the education system, the programming that comes from the media, that too has to clear out. And when you've created enough space in your system, because that's what's happening when you're clearing all the stuff out, you're making space in your system, you're making space in your cellular biology for the light to anchor in, the light of your higher self to come in, the light of who you truly are to come down into your body. So many people talk about transcendence. It's actually more about descendance. Descending, let the light descend into your body, heaven on earth. That's what heaven on earth means. It means embodiment. And so the third stage is quite a bold one, just like the second stages and the first stages, is you turn towards the light. You walk away from the story of suffering that is in you, and by walking away from the story of suffering that's in you, you by an extension naturally walk away from the story of suffering in the world. You turn away from it. And that means leaving, departing from, walking away from toxic things that you have given your attention to, everything from a job to a relationship to what you watch on TV. You walk away from it and you give yourself to the light. It's like walking into the sunset of soul, walking into the sunset of being, giving yourself to God's country. And I don't mean the religious God. I'm sure you know that. You give yourself, you walk into God's country. And it's from that place that you can really make the difference that you're here to make. It's from that place that you can truly serve. Because it's the light that you are, and it's the light that removes all darkness. It's the light that transmutes illness, that clears programming. And that's the work I do, healing people with Starlight, which I do in person and remotely all over the world. I transmit Starlight to people, and the amount of radical, miraculous transformation, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, is unbelievable. It's the light that's doing the work. And I have been blessed with this mission because of the amount of space I've created in my system by clearing the trauma and the programming, by disidentifying from the story of suffering in my body, and by ending those addictions, those attachments to who I am not, so that I can turn towards and embody who I am, which is my higher self. So this is what I want to offer you, is those 3 stages to sit with, to think about. And it's a heroic journey, as I'm sure you know. It's a heroic journey to walk that, because it actually means a great deal of sacrifice. You're sacrificing who you've known yourself to be. You're sacrificing relationships, jobs. You're sacrificing habits to enter the sacred, a more sacred experience of yourself and life. And those 2 words are wed, sacred and sacrifice. What's interesting about the word sacred is if you move the C and the A around, you have the word scared. So you're sacrificing scared to enter or embody the sacred, which is an interesting thing to look at. Okay, well, it's raining a little bit. I think I made it through okay. Thank you. And I'm going to put a link in the description for an article that tells a little bit more of that story about that letting go of I am wrong. And it'll provide more context for you. And I think there's an eagle over my shoulder, so what a beautiful time to end. I will take that as a sign to end. So thank you so much. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, click on notifications. Thank you for supporting me, and thank you. Amen.